Hello, you can see me here just setting up my wet palette, and I'm using an old kind of flat Tupperware bowl which I've never really used at all, and I thought I would take it for my small palette and use it as a wet palette. This allows me to put a lid on it and keep my paints wet for up to 3 to 4 weeks, so it stops me wasting so much paint. And you can see that I don't have a completely clean palette as it is anyway, but this allows me in dry climates to be able to actually get the most out of my paints. So I'm just starting off with some Turner's yellow and some Naples yellow, and I've got some white there, and I've also got some black, or actually Paynes grey. And I had this idea that I'm going to have a light side and a dark side, and on one side I'm going to like paint, you know, write in black, and on the other side I'm going to write in like white pen. Anyway, I have a very rough kind of lollipop flower sketch in there, and in the middle of the page I'm actually going to paint a bouquet. So I'm kind of working on that at the moment. I'm working around it. You can see that I'm gradually getting lighter as I get in, because I want the light to be behind. So if the light is behind, there's this kind of lightness emanating from that. And the white is a gesso, and I like to use the gesso instead of white paint in this kind of scenario, because in mixed media work you want to be able to have enough tooth for the next layers, so you've got to be able to work with that in the next layers. And so you can see here that I'm using lots of different blending strokes, and I like having that kind of painty look where I don't just paint in one direction, I paint all over the place. This is sped up about 3 times, so it didn't take me very long to do, but it looks like I'm painting furiously. And I kind of was, but this looks like Ever Ready Bunny kind of stuff, or chipmunk stuff, I guess, if you're thinking motion. And I'm now gessoing in the flowers roughly, because I want to have a white surface so that the paint shows through, because there are some colours that you use where the yellow is going to affect it underneath, although yellow is one of the most transparent colours. I've got a Naples yellow and some gesso in there, so I really wanted to make sure that I had a really nice base for the bouquet roughly. And then I decided that I was going to put the Paynes grey on the other side and completely paint the background in before I did anything over the top. And I've got a bit of water in that brush there. So you find on this dylusions paper that the lights go particularly well, and the darks, you need to lay them and layer them and layer them. And so I'm just using the white gesso and the Paynes grey, and I'm going to work in on that. And you'll see me adding and subtracting. And what I mean by that is I go dark and then I pick up some light, and I go light and I pick up some dark. And when I'm working the transitions from very dark to very light, I work in one colour, blend it in while the paint is still wet, although the paint was drying pretty quickly on this. So you can see that there are areas that are darker, and then I go in with some light, and then not necessarily always a lot of light on my brush, but particularly when I'm blending back. So I'll go light and blend it back out, and then it'll look like there's kind of a line there. You can see that line between the white and the dark, the light and the dark. And then I take the dark back in and I cover that line. You can see me going over that now and kind of obliterating it a bit, and then adding more in. So you can see it's this adding and subtracting kind of idea. And essentially I do that until all my paint is gone. I budgeted roughly how much paint I thought I would need for this particular part, and I did. I used the whole lot up of the Paynes grey. I had some yellow left over, so my next page, over when I flipped over for a future project, I actually used the rest of that yellow paint. So I've got like 2 pages in a row where I've got yellow paint backgrounds, I guess. But I mean, that's the way that I work. I like to try and use all my supplies up and not waste a lot. So I waited until that was completely dry, and now I'm putting in the colours for the flowers. So I've got some pirole orange and some jaune orange, which is like a Naples orange, you know, like you got your Naples yellow, it's kind of like Naples orange. And then I've got some brilliant magenta, which is not a transparent or dark magenta, it's got a bit of white in it. And I've got some phthalo green and some lime yellow lime green, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to start working in the darks first. And you see that I just work in the darks. And I work very well. Like I just put those nice kind of shadows in. And then all I'm doing is getting the white and blending it while it's still wet. So then I get, you know, like 10 or so other shades while I'm working. And I do the same thing, and I'm going to keep repeating that process. And I sort of come out with like peonies. I don't know, they're like club roses, peonies, heritage kind of full roses that come out, and they don't have that classic kind of bud shape. They look like rounded flowers, and they're some of my favorite flowers, so I like to keep painting them. And you can't get them very well over here in Australia. I found a florist nearby that actually does stock them, and most of them that she stocks are like silk, so I of course wouldn't buy them because I hate silk flowers. But she did get some in, and they kind of look like a cross between a rose and a tulip, and they have that kind of going for them, and all in these pretty pink pastel-y colours. So I'm just doing the underpainting for the leaves so that I get the greens coming through really quite nicely. And I'm loving orange, and you know, these colours work incredibly well around with the yellow of the background, and also with the Paynes grey. The Paynes grey I substituted a lot for black. I think sometimes black is very, very harsh, and I don't like to, shadows are often not black. So I'm just correcting some of the shape of the flower here because I wanted it to kind of overlap a bit. And this one's a little bit less defined. Kind of essentially one big mess. And now I'm just getting some Dylusions red. And it's kind of like a waratah flower, but not really. And I'm wanting to get a little bit more abstract with that. So I'm using as my shading colour some of the phthalo green, and that makes a really nice neutral. And then that gives the shadows. And you're just going to see me work that. You're going to see me work the darks and the lights with that. And that's to show the foreground and the background. And Dylusions paints obviously go very well on these Dylusions paper. It works very well, and they flow very well on the paper. And I find that I don't have to overwork them that much. Sometimes I do overwork things sometimes, particularly when I'm using a brayer. But for this, a lot of it's showing up white because they're slightly glossy when they're wet. Yeah, so I was just putting the shadows in and using that green because the green is the natural toning, and then I wanted to get a little bit abstract, so I kind of wanted to flesh it out a little bit more and throw the red out a bit more and just kind of splash some colours around. And I started doing the leaves here, and I'm doing a combination of the two colours, and they created a whole plethora of different greens. And I use the phthalo green to be the stems, but also the shading leaf shadows. But I am going to darken them even further later on. And I'm just doing this with a filbert brush, and I want to throw those in and really not do too much with them. I want them kind of really abstract-y. But then I kind of think, oh yeah, I'm going to add some more in over here. Felt like it needed the balance. And then at the top, I'm going to decide to put, you know, like some buds or flowery kind of bud bits. And because I'm using up the paint, right? So, and I think that just adds something different. And I'm just dotting the paint around. And it's just something different for the bouquet. I don't know, sometimes you just want to slap paint on, and that's essentially what I was doing here, just slapping paint on, having fun, slapping it on. And of course I'm spraying it, put the lid on, there you go, and that keeps it good. So then I'm going in with some pastels, and these Holbein pastels, they're fabulous. They're very dry, and that was a big mistake. For a surface that you want to write on, don't put pastels in. So I'm able to just tone up and change some of the greens, make them a bit limey, and then I'm bluing you know, adding some blue in there, but I'm not doing it in areas that I'm going to write. Even though these are pretty dry for pastels. Oh, I broke one. No. I'm just adding them in here because I want to use them, and they dry quite nice. Like, they never cure. So the dry aspect of these works very well for me. Yeah. And I'm using like it's a much more kind of a mint bluer green. I'm just working a little bit of that colour in. Not a lot, just a bit. But you'll see when I try to... Oh, and I'm going to finish off with these new Sennelier pastels. I actually got these probably in September of last year. Haven't used them yet. Have a look. Massive set. I know. I went a bit nuts. I tried to get Holbein pastels, but I couldn't get them shipped to Australia. It was just proving insane. So I got, I think, the biggest box set of Sennelier oil pastels you can get, which they're much more oily than the Holbeins. So I'm kind of a little bit disappointed that I got them rather than the Holbeins. I should have just waited and figured out how to do it. Anyway, so I'm using some dark blue, some dark purple, some dark green, and just blending them in and adding a few little bits of toning. And they do blend in with the Holbeins quite well. So I'm just adding some shadows in. You just see I'm just faffing around. Just working some, you know, more pale kind of colours in. That doesn't look great on camera, but it looks better in real life. I think I went back in with the red and then made it redder. Yeah. So you see, it looks like it's coming together really well. And now I've got to put those Sennelier pastels away. And it's a huge big wooden box. Yeah. So now I'm going to go in and just try and use a bit of white, but I'm essentially going to start writing because the white pen obviously didn't like oil pastels, and you have to kind of just roll with the punches when you're in mixed media and see what works and what doesn't work. So I'm just working on my declarations on this page. I like starting off, it's kind of a calligraphy thing where you start off with a large letter and keep going, and I just do my normal kind of script for this. But I wanted the writing on the left side to be black and the right side to be white. I like the contrast, and it's like the light side and the dark side, or the sunlight and the shadow, whatever imagery you like to put on these kinds of things. And I really was just thinking about choices that we make, outlooks on life that we make, that we have, whether you're a half glass full or a half glass empty kind of person, you know. So I just kind of wrote a lot of those things down. I'm starting to hit that pastel, and I'm like really regretting the fact that I put those lines of pastel in, and I'm going to give up on that in a minute and start on the right hand side, where I'm going to use a white uniball marker. It's a white signo. I find that the rollerball just works really well for this kind of thing, and I do the same thing on this side, and I see it's a really good contrast that you can make with the light and the dark. You just make sure that with these pens that you don't go over anywhere where there's oil pastel, because all it does is just gouge out the oil pastel and ruin your pen. And that's a really important thing to think about when you're doing this. And I just think we talk about our lived experience, or as an art therapist, that's a really good term that I use all the time, is we want to improve not just your life, but your lived experience of life. And that is how you interpret it, and how you see things. And it's different from happiness. I think a lot of us don't understand what actual happiness is. We have periods of comfortable or happiness in our lives, and it always seems to be something that we try to attain. But life is more about having a good lived experience and filling your life with those things that improve that lived experience. And if you then string patterns of good lived experiences, then overall your happiness levels start to improve. And that's kind of the way that I approach my life right now, which is really cool. Because it's not about having the perfect life all the time. It's more about having a string of good experiences. So I'm using a chameleon marker because to be honest with you, I don't like chameleon markers. They just take too long to use. As if I wanted to be sitting there with my chambers upturned all day waiting for all the variations in colour. But they actually go well over pastels. So I'm also here just finishing off and putting some darker kind of details in with an 8B lumograph graphite pencil. And I love this pencil. Like, I have a couple of them now because I just use them, and then they're more like a non-permeable or non-water soluble kind of Stabilo or pencil. I really like them because my sketches stick with them and my sketchy lines stay. So I also found out that if you blend them in with the pencils, so they'll draw over the top of the pastels, the oil pastels here, but if you blend your finger, they will just blend in with the pastels, you can see there. And normally you can't blend them all that much. Normally they're kind of more of a waxy kind of a pencil. That's not really smudgeable. But I hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed making it. Ciao for now. Learn something new today. It keeps you young.